news and rumors that don't get reported. Stories I write that are often distorted. Got my notebook and pen, and I'm ready to listen. Tell me the truth, I'll consider your position. I've seen killers with eyes so cold and dead, and others go to prison because of what someone said, rotting away for the rest of their lives, leaving a hole here on the outside. Things are sad here on earth, and it's no wonder why, when you consider the sociopaths who remain in charge. It's me who sees the system for all its flaws, and I usually start with the probable cause. My right hand is reading the probable cause. Welcome to The Probable Cause. This is a podcast covering Allen County, Indiana, and northeastern Indiana, and sometimes the state of Indiana. I'm your host, Jamie Duffy, a local journalist, and to my left is Michael McAlexander. He is our Allen County prosecutor. And today, contributing will also be my right hand. She's feeling better, and we are very glad to have her back. So today, we're going to do a special segment, actually. We're going to talk about the George Floyd protests here in Fort Wayne. 5 years ago to this day, Mike was the chief deputy prosecutor here, and I was the police and fire reporter for the Journal-Gazette. We were both very involved from our different perspectives. I was down there every day, got to know many of the protesters, and Mike and his crew up here in the Allen County Prosecutor's Office were writing up probable causes, attending court hearings as much as we could in the middle of COVID. There were arrest reports, and my right hand was just telling me that she actually happened upon the scene on May 29th, the day that the protest started, and was like, no, I don't know what's going on. And what was your quote, my right hand?
I got out of Dodge.
She got the heck out of Dodge. So we're going back to May 29th, 2020. Let me set the scene. On May 25th, 5 years ago, George Floyd, who was an out-of-work bouncer and truck driver, he'd actually lost his jobs due to COVID, slipped a counterfeit $20 bill at Cup Foods on East 38th Street in Minneapolis to buy cigarettes. Then he sat in the driver's seat of a car that was across the street, and two employees of Cup Foods came out and confronted him, like, you know, what are you doing? You've got this, your bill was counterfeit. Someone called 911. Police arrived. Officers ordered Floyd out of the car, and he initially complied, according to news reports that I found online. But then he struggled with the idea of getting into the police car and was handcuffed. And he did say he was claustrophobic, which I understand claustrophobia because I have struggled with that in my life too. I got stuck in an elevator twice. I know what claustrophobia is like. Same elevator, by the way. So Floyd was placed face down on the ground, and Officer Derek Chauvin knelt on his neck for about 9 minutes. To his right were a couple of rookie police officers who were sort of like in training with Chauvin, right? And so they did try and speak up. I have a little bit of empathy for them. But at the end, video footage shows Floyd repeatedly saying, "I can't breathe," and pleading for help. This was according to the AP News and bystander videos. Despite pleas from the bystanders and Floyd himself, the officers did not attempt to provide medical assistance. That's according to the New York Times. Floyd was pronounced dead at the hospital after being taken into custody. Now, what was different about this arrest and death really were the bystanders who were taking the video. Darnella Frazier was her name. She kept her camera on, her cell phone on. George Floyd died after Breonna Taylor in Louisville, I want to say, and Ahmaud Arbery in Georgia, but the world didn't see their deaths roll in real time. We saw that with the George Floyd. That's hard to say, George Floyd. The video caught on fire, and there was a groundswell of anger that rose up in the nation and the world. There were protests literally everywhere. We're talking about internationally in Europe. I mean, everywhere, if you could just take yourself back to that time. Yeah, go ahead.
Wasn't one of the things that got the public so enraged was that he was calling out for his mom?
Oh, you know, I don't even remember that, but that would have hit me too because I have two boys. And you do too, so, or you did. Unfortunately, we lost one. So the Black Lives Matter movement first appeared in 2013 after the Trayvon Martin homicide. It became important again. And by May 29th, a young woman here in Fort Wayne named Alicia Roush, went on social media and called for a protest at the courthouse green at 5 p.m. Now, I was down there and I took photos. I always took photos, even when I was at the newspaper, because it helped me write the story when I got back. Oh yes, this happened then, this happened at that time. By her side was Sheila Curry Campbell, who at that time was a county councilwoman and also an officer with the NAACP locally. Scores of people showed up, many with signs that read, "I can't breathe." By 7 p.m., according to my documentation, protesters were on the Martin Luther King Jr. Bridge. Traffic jams were commencing. So, and as my right hand already said, she was down there right when it was getting started, and already we had traffic jams commencing. So I think there was tear gas before I got there because I had gone home to file a story. And then I get a phone call from my colleague at the Journal-Gazette, Matt LeBlanc. He was the court reporter at the time. And he's saying in that Yankee accent of his, "Jamie, get down here." They're blowing tear gas. And I'm like, okay, well, I was going to write my story. No, get down here, I'm telling you. We also had Dave Gong, who was a City Hall reporter there. He was there because we knew something historic was happening in Fort Wayne and in the nation. That night on May 29th, it was light out. It was a beautiful night. Were you down there at all, May 29th?
No.
Okay. It wasn't really even dark around 9 p.m. If you look tonight and see, it will still be somewhat light out at 9 p.m. However, going on for 9:30, it was getting dark. The street lights were on. The SWAT team was lined up at Clinton and Barry. The Bearcat was poised for action, and then a water bottle arced through the air. And then there were a bunch of water bottles coming from the protesters. They were heaving them at the police. Police were sitting in the middle of Clinton Street. People were sitting in the middle of Clinton Street. They weren't moving. They were told numerous times to leave, and they wouldn't move. And so the tear gas started. And I can remember winding up at the garage across the way with Dave and Matt. There were some other people in there. COVID was very active. I stood there and thought to myself, are we going to get COVID? We've just been gassed, but are we going to get COVID? That's the night 50 windows were smashed. Dave Gong got a video or photo of the kid who took his skateboard and smashed it into the window of Jimmy John's at the corner of South Calhoun and Wayne Street. There was a melee that lasted till about 2:30 in the morning. The next morning, Mayor Tom Henry held a press conference, and city officials, including the police chief, Steve Reed, and the sheriff at that time, David Gladieux. There was a lot of talk that outsiders had caused the damage, but when Matt LeBlanc, our court reporter at the Journal-Gazette, got the court documents on the many people who were arrested, very few of them were from outside the county, maybe a little bit outside. This was a genuine protest, in my opinion. I'm not so sure Mark totally agrees with me. So that day, which was May 30th, the police were prepared. The protest started off peacefully enough, and one of the biggest contributing factors was a group of religious folk. I never found out exactly who they were. They were dressed like it was the 1850s, the 1860s. I think, my feeling is that maybe they were Mennonite, because they weren't Jehovah's Witnesses, they weren't Amish people. They were singing these beautiful hymns, beautiful harmonies. Everybody was calmed down. And then the next thing they did, which was really, really brilliant, was they pulled out the mic and they let people get in front of the courthouse, stand up on those pylons there, and just tell their story. So that was very cathartic, I thought. The only problem was they left at 4 p.m. And I even said to them, do you have to leave? But they said, oh yeah, we've got to get up to wherever they were. I don't know if it was LaGrange or Elkhart or wherever they were from. I'm talking about counties. So about 4 p.m., people are sitting there, picnic blankets and everything else. But then they got restless, all the protesters. And then they started chanting and they started getting agitated. And then the SWAT team had the Bearcat there at Clinton and Barry, right? And so by 5 p.m., They were told to leave. Once again, they were gathering at that intersection, and then the tear gas came. And from that time on, I have video that's very interesting, like the SWAT team advancing on the courthouse green, where the sheriff had his men lined up at Harrison and Main Street. And it was just sort of a cat and mouse game. Some of the protesters went south, some of them went west, some of them went east, some of them followed around the city-county building. And it was another melee, I would just say. I got gas for the second time. I kept telling myself, well, maybe I should go back and write a story, and then I'd end up going on with some other protesters. I know Deputy Chief of the Fire Department, Adam O'Connor, told me that he got gassed as the fire department was going around trying to render medical aid to a lot of these people. And then I finally wound up at Clinton and Wayne and watched the police advance up Clinton. When an officer walked up Clinton, he made an abrupt turn and turned to me and two other young men who were protesters and literally shot his flashbang right there. Now, it wasn't a real gun, thank God, but thinking about it now, I thought, if we had been in an authoritarian state, it might have ended differently. We weren't. He was trying to scare us away. They were really trying to pick up everybody they could that day. They didn't want our city burning down like other cities. And so I think that was their goal. But we walked a few more feet where some officers were staged at Washington and Clinton. And that's when somebody shot a rubber bullet from that group. It bounced off the grass, hit me in the ankle bone, or not in the ankle bone, but right under, which I'm grateful it was right under, because I think if it hit the ankle bone, it would have had a different effect on the nerves. And they were two of the wildest nights we ever had. So up until this point, I haven't got to the Unity March yet on June 4th. Is there anything either one of you would like to add to everything that I prepared you for?
I guess I'm going back. This, on one hand, it appeared to be very spontaneous. On another level, there were some indications of pre-planning. People had bottles of milk to wash out the tear gas out of their eyes. There were some things like that, and it's a little hard to get a gallon of milk downtown Fort Wayne on a Friday or Saturday night. So there were some signs of some organization behind this, and that it was perhaps not quite as spontaneous by all of the people.
If you go back and look at the social media too, it kind of makes you feel like some people were planning some stuff.
Mm-hmm. And I think
that could be true.
Yeah.
And Mike, what were you doing at this specific time? Because this was the second day. It was a Saturday. Do you remember what your role was then as the Deputy Chief Prosecutor?
I remember watching the press conference live, and Tom Henry's words were very powerful. Mm-hmm. And I think that's part of what probably strikes a lot of law enforcement and anyone who's been in this community for a long time, and that is, this isn't how we treat each other here. I mean, there are people that disagree with each other, people that, criticize my office, criticize the media, but this had a level of unbridled hate mm-hmm. that came out of it that was a lot different than just people upset by a single decision. And I don't...
Java does this chalk. We don't throw water bottles.
Right.
We need to explain what Java is. It's a victim rights group for justice, accountability, and victim assistance. So
advocacy.
But I will say this, my right hand. You were known to chalk the courthouse and in front of the prosecutor's office de temps en temps.
We chalked everywhere. We had a family that chalked every day. Every time Karen washed it off, they went down and chalked again.
Right.
But that didn't hurt people. It didn't hurt. We weren't throwing water bottles.
No. And you weren't throwing frozen water bottles.
Yeah, and the frozen.
Or water bottles that had were actually overpressure device, essentially a bomb.
Well, also the police did say that they had rocks thrown at them. I witnessed the water bottles. I never witnessed the rocks, but I'm going to have to take their word for it. So anyway, on June 4th, this is a few days afterwards, the mayor held a unity march when all kinds of law enforcement, protesters, and other residents walked from the courthouse down to the bottom of the MLK Jr. Bridge. It's not really a mile or anything like that. It was very symbolic. And then there were microphones. This was a day that was sweltering, and we are in the middle of COVID, I'm going to remind you again. We all ended up in this little tiny area down there. The mayor gave a very good speech. Steve Reed was very passionate about what he said. And then there were some protesters. I remember Rolando Rencher, who's also known as Alien Nature, and he's a rapper here in town. He gave a speech. I don't recall Elisa Rausch, and I will say that Elisa Rausch was very upset by the violence. She organized the protest, but she was very upset that it devolved into that. So anyway, anything to say about that Unity March?
I mean, I again, give it to Mayor Henry to try to put a lid on this and show that what the real Fort Wayne was. Right.
So it's true. I think he was reaching out at all times. He had to do a balancing act with the police and with the protesters. He reached out to the protesters. The police were very quick to put Mitch McKinney and Sofia Rosales-Scatina out there. They were like community, reaching out from the community. And the protest continued. But I don't think
a lot of the protesters were not happy about that march and didn't attend it because they felt like they were selling out the people that attended it. And I mean, a lot of the protesters got to be called Uncle Toms and stuff like that participated in that march.
That's true, but I guess you would expect something like that, you know.
Well, I think it was also hard to figure out who were the actual leaders. Were there actual leaders of this? Was this something of a spontaneous eruption on one hand, but planned behind the scenes, but not by the people that were necessarily stepping up to say we're a leader of this?
There was a great jostling. I witnessed that from the ground at the courthouse when they were and there was some organizing, and there were, but people were making friends too. It kind of reminded me of the hippie movement, if you will. And that was around the Vietnam War. This was around civil rights. So one of the most...
of them wanted to be the leader, though. Like, they fought over who was going to be the leader, quote unquote. To the point, even in some of the factions, that the fight over who was going to be the leader became more important than the reason they were fighting.
I'm sure that's
human nature is a wonderful thing.
That's right.
I think another point that who were the protesters. I think the public mind is that this was the minority community striking back, and so many of the people, both that we ultimately prosecuted, and the people that came and protested in front of Karen Richards' home in late June of that year, were not minorities.
No, they were white kids. But a lot of them went to North Side, New Haven, Heritage, Wayne, South Side. So those were our diverse high schools. Because I asked every kid out there, what high school do you go to?
So I'm just saying that here, I don't know that it was much a Black Lives Matter driven kind of agenda. Again, I just go back a little bit to trying to put this into the COVID perspective, that we had shut down by mid-March so many of our recreational and other institutions, and being able to go out to dinner, socialize in any kind of a manner. I think during that time, if you had loved ones in a nursing home, you had stories of people going out to the windows outside and trying to say hi to grandma.
I did a story on that, actually.
And the isolation, when I look back on it, I just wonder how much was there this pent-up frustration that COVID had caused, that this was like a detonator that set a lot of people off and acting irrationally. I know later I prosecuted a couple of young black women who tried to burn down a little parking kiosk. And
downtown?
Yeah.
Oh.
And, you know, it was just, they weren't radicalized. I think they both had jobs, and they had come down to kind of watch the show. And I don't know what got into them, but I certainly didn't put them into the category of some terrorist. Some of the other damage, the windows being broken, windows at the courthouse,
right,
windows at Jimmy John's, and
50
I think
of them. 50 windows downtown.
And all the other ones. I don't know, maybe I just don't get why that is a legitimate form of protest. It's against the law to do that. And you know, we prosecuted that accordingly. But again, getting into what was the mindset that made people so angry that they wanted to do that.
And yet it always seems like it turns that way when you have, I mean, even when let's say, an NFL team wins the championship, you've got that going on downtown wherever. I'm sorry?
I said they burned down their city.
Yeah. So at least that didn't happen here. So I want to talk about one of the most spectacular arrests that didn't happen downtown. It was on Coliseum Boulevard on June 16 or 17. We have documentation of it. I would love to put that up. I just kind of need to talk to Aaron Fogg about it. It was on close to Parnell or North Anthony during the daytime. Tied up traffic for at least a half an hour. I would say probably closer to an hour. They saw Aaron Fogg and Joe Black Dees. He called himself Joe Black Dees because they were two leaders of the movement. They emerged, shall we say, and they also became a couple. And so he pulled them over. They had misdemeanor warrants, determined to get them down there to the Allen County Jail. But what went on with he's now Sergeant Mark Gerardo, over the megaphone, hey Aaron, you know, it was just sort of like, it had a different quality for it, and then she reacted. He did say at one time in the video that they were in the line of fire, and that really set her off. You know, why are you going to kill us? And I have the probable cause here. It's actually, I mean, you know, a little bit of humor there. He said, the defendant was belligerent and angrily yelling profanities at the police and refusing to comply. And at one point she said, "What are you probably causing us to do?" I mean, you just have to, you go back 5 years. I mean, it's better than a lot of movies. But anyway, they were finally arrested, and we have that. There was also one that upset me, actually. It was the July 23rd when the daughter of the late Bishop Desmond Tutu, Naomi Tutu, came to speak at the Promenade Park Pavilion. And Faith in Indiana, Audrey Davis, Cookie Rutledge, and Anthony and Sandra K. Payton of the Come As You Are Community Church hosted this human rights speaker. But Audrey Davis hired the FWPD to act as security. She got street crimes. And they were sitting there with their phones, checking people as they walked in. And right in the middle of this woman's speech, all these there were like 4 protesters who were actually invited to give a short speech. And then it was Naomi Tutu. And then they kept turning around and watching as this young woman left the pavilion because she felt all those eyes staring at her, and then subsequently getting arrested to the point where a couple of them left. And to me, it was so disrespectful. And Audrey Davis let them have it. and said, you know, here I hired you to be my security, and you're going around arresting somebody. That misdemeanor warrant had been out there for about 30 days. I mean, she was just 19, 20-year-old girl. I talked to some other police that said, yeah, they could have waited. Anthony Payton, I have him on video saying, talking about that incident, and then about how some young people lost jobs as a result of being seen on television. 21 was down there all the time. They got some amazing footage that the Washington Post used. And it was a time, as you're talking about, what made those two young girls want to burn down a kiosk? Who knows? So, and out of that came the Commission on Police Reform and Racial Justice. And out of that, we got body cameras for every single police officer, which I think is really a wonderful thing. It protects the officers and the victims, or whatever you want to call them. So I could go on from there. There was an ACLU lawsuit. I found something that I wrote about when I was at the Journal-Gazette. Drone deployment during protest response. It was written in September of that year. The protesters got paranoid, you know, and some of them did get followed by the police. But actually using those drones helped commanders identify supply routes protesters were using to move resources and people, as well as detect movements of crowds. So I think when you start talking about supply routes, it sounds almost like George Washington had his spies out there. You know, that's what conjured up in my mind. It warned they were able to warn officers on the front lines if they were going to be approached by high-risk instigators embedded within peaceful protesters. So right there, we did have peaceful protesters, a lot of them. Assisted
And a lot that weren't.
What?
And a lot that weren't.
Okay, had to get that in. Assisted other units with identification of spotters who were telling protesters locations of police officers. So now you've got both sides working in that. Detecting in real time the size of a crowd and whether it was increasing or dispersing. Provide overwatch during traffic stops. And as a matter of fact, when Aaron Fogg and Joe Black Dees were arrested, yes, there were drones and they called in the SWAT team. So it was something that, and we can also talk about, well, actually I would kind of like to talk about the two brothers who were accused and charged with bashing out the windows downtown. They both had warrants out since 2020. One finally turned himself in last year. Both were white boys. Both were from Fort Wayne. Well, I don't know if Roanoke counts as Fort Wayne. I think one of them was from Roanoke. Why is there a warrant still out on the other one?
Yeah, do warrants ever expire?
Some of them can, depending on the crime. They can also be renewed, however. So I'm not sure on this one. I think if it's for a felony, we wouldn't have to renew it.
No, it's not. It's, I can tell you exactly. It's got a misdemeanor A for rioting, misdemeanor A for criminal mischief, which would be bashing out the windows, and a misdemeanor B for disorderly conduct.
I think A misdemeanors we don't have to renew.
They're just there forever. Okay, so whereas this one, I think
now,
we could...
Generally, though, we don't extradite on misdemeanors out of state. So if somebody is out of state, they generally won't be brought back.
And there was a restitution hearing for, can I say his name even though it's a misdemeanor?
Yeah.
Okay.
It's public record.
It's public record. His name is Austin Cheney Culp, and he has been ordered to pay back $4,000, which I don't remember how much the windows cost, but maybe they would have to, when you charge somebody with this, do you have to know the number of windows that he
Generally, when a restitution order is made, it's usually attached to the charge, And so I'm not sure with him if that was the Jimmy John's window. That would be probably pretty easy to get a dollar figure for what that costs. There might have been other windows that he might have been responsible for, but we don't have necessarily the proof.
The video, in other
Right,
words.
right.
So when you had your press conference in August with Karen Richards, she was the prosecutor at the time, you did pinpoint, I think, 5 officers that you said you were investigating.
I believe that's true. Further investigation showed that they did not commit any crimes. And I think we ultimately released that way. At that time, we had assigned about 6 people that spent most of their summer reviewing any video surveillance that we had, the drone footage, as well as any in-car cameras that were available, any regular surveillance cameras that might be on the courthouse or surrounding buildings, and to see what was going on.
What about individuals who happen to take videos of what was going on?
I think we asked the public to provide any if they had that stuff, and I think we did receive some. But we wanted to do a thorough review, both, and I think what ended up happening, we had about 150 arrests.
Right.
At the time we did the press conference, which was August 17th, so it had been 2.5 months. I think we'd already completed about 50 cases, had either pled guilty, been put on a diversion program, or in some other way their cases had been determined. We had about 50 that we had found had prosecutable merit, and were continuing on to prosecute those cases. And then there were 50 that our video review did not necessarily support what information we had in written reports, if you will, kind of connect the dots to the behavior to what was alleged. Did we have proof? Because I mean, clearly it was chaotic in getting identities established. The police, as you would expect them to be, were more worried about protecting the community and restoring order than they were making sure that every T was crossed and I was dotted. So, so we had some that we just couldn't connect up the evidence or the video evidence to show the behavior, and the officers potentially had difficulty identifying people when it was that chaotic. So we ended up dismissing roughly a third of the cases because we didn't feel that we could prove them.
But in everyday life, isn't that kind of true too? Is that a high number for that? Because it seems like just in everyday life, your normal, regular, everyday charges, you drop a certain percentage because the prosecutor doesn't necessarily see what the police officer saw.
Right.
Or you have to be sure that you can prove it.
I mean, we have
Was
to make
that
it
at a higher rate than normal, or?
Yeah, I think because normally the police, especially with misdemeanors, they see an event happen, they are then able to effectuate an arrest. They take the person straight to lockup and do their paperwork. I think with this, there was a lot of handing off of people so that, okay, I saw this happen, give it to somebody else. When we went back and tried to connect it all up, we couldn't always connect it up.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, you had your investigators at it, but one thing that you did investigate, now on May 30th, that was the same day that Balin Brake lost his eye, right there at the corner of Clinton and Berry. It was the same day that Juan P. Gonzalez also apparently threw some kind of a device, and he injured an Indiana State Trooper, right?
That's what we charged him with.
Okay.
The jury found him not guilty of that.
Right. And Mike actually was the
Trial deputy.
trial deputy, as was James Posey.
Yes.
Right.
We tried it together.
Right, and they pointed out his tattoos and everything else. I'll never forget when the jury came in and said that they found him not guilty. He was shocked. He was
Well,
absolutely shocked.
He had some very distinctive tattoos. He'd
Right.
taken his shirt off, and we had video that showed him going back and throwing what appeared to be a bottle, almost like a quarterback dropping back to throw. And what we didn't have was continuity on the video showing it going and hitting the officer. And whatever it was had exploded on the street, and we were never able to find any remnants of it. Now, again, this was a very chaotic scene. It's not a normal crime scene where we can go in, stop everybody, use our tape to plot it off and carefully examine the scene. You had hundreds of people down there on Berry Street while this was going on.
Mm-hmm.
He was in like the parking lot of the Citizen Square, so he was throwing it from there. There were bushes that somewhat obstructed the view.
Right.
So, you know, I believe that he did it, but I also respect the jury's verdict, and the jury said not guilty.
He was definitely older, and he was not from here. So
That is
he would have
correct.
fit into that narrative that they weren't. We don't know why he was here. It said he was from Elkhart, but you're actually saying he was from California.
He'd been from California before. He'd been in Elkhart for maybe a year or so.
Mm-hmm.
He had picked up some sort of criminal charge in Elkhart.
So, but that's the same time that bail and break. And now Washington Post took that video, and they did throw some of this video up online. And there was one of a local officer. I happen to know what his name is, but nothing ever came of it. He took the tear gas. This girl was screaming at his face. There's no doubt about it. I've seen it quite a few times, but not since 2020, I want to say. And he just got fed up, and he took the tear gas and he just aimed it right at her. Right, I mean, her face was like this far away, and then she just crumpled. And there was another incident on the courthouse green where that happened to a boy, and I never heard that there were any charges there.
I don't believe there were.
No, but I also saw some kindness. I can remember one older man who seemed to be involved in the protests, and he was trying to keep up with the younger people. And he was wearing a backpack, perhaps a homeless person. I don't know. Because you got to remember at that time, too, the police and the kids were kind of getting to know each other. I mean, at one point during the arrest of Aaron and Joe, they even said, "Oh, Mark Gerardo, I know him. He's good people." They kind of reassured each other, "Yeah, he's good people." So they already knew who he was. They knew, he knew who they were. But the officer knelt down because he was following the other officers, and he helped that man up. And it's on 21. 21 got that tape, and it just that really made me happy.
Well,
but Washington Post did determine that bail and break's I think that they had some video experts that could look and see all this stuff that I could never see. Go ahead.
Well, I just wanted to I think you mentioned after this was done, because I think we're getting close, the mayor did appoint a commission on police reform
Yep.
and racial justice. And I was part of that commission and attended a lot of that. There was a lot of criticism out in social media about the police department. And we did complete a report. It was submitted. And sometimes because it wasn't sensational, it didn't get a tremendous amount of coverage.
Hey, we wrote it up at the Journal-Gazette.
But I think what people in this community need to know is that when we looked at all of those national standards that some of these national groups were criticizing police departments for, we were actually doing like 7 out of the 8, and the one we weren't doing was kind of a matter of semantics more than it was that we really weren't doing it. Fort Wayne has had a very forward-looking police department. I mean, we've had mental health training for years. A lot of these things that departments have been criticized for Fort Wayne has been doing for a long time. So I think that's something to just remind people that.
But since then, we've had what, 8 police action shootings, and 6 of them ended in death or something like that.
Since 2020, I'm sure there's been more than that. That sounds just like last year.
Yeah,
Last year.
I think we had 7.
I can't even think of any in years prior to that, but just last year.
We've had others. As you know, somebody who's looked at all of those cases, and there's still a couple under review, but the ones that have been done recently, the one that probably got the most publicity was Mr. Parham last summer, and that was one where the body camera really showed what happened in that case, and it was invaluable in analyzing what occurred, because if you remember on that one, there had been a bystander that was taking video, and that video looked like the officer was standing outside the car and just pulled out his gun and shot. When we had his body camera, the person was told to keep his hands on the dash, show them your hands. And this is something for anyone who's watching this. If you have an incident with a police officer, if you get stopped, the one thing they are looking for is, what are you doing with your hands? Because they don't know what you've got in your car. They don't know if you have a gun. In that situation, there was a gun that was between Mr. Parham's legs.
Right.
And when he kept dropping his hands off the dash,
that left hand went
and
down.
he did it like on the 3rd time,
Right.
not responding. Police officers are trained to respond to that. They want to go home to their families as well.
As I say in my one verse in the probable cause, I want to remind everybody.
And the watchword that studies have done, simulations have done, is that action beats reaction. So to put it very simply in some of the trainings I've seen, it is not the Wild West. It is not standing in the street on 3 draw. What the experts say, the best you get in that situation is both of you get shot or both miss. But if somebody is in a situation and they've got a gun in their hand, even if it's at their side, and they are not responding to the officer's command, if they decide to shoot, they're either going to take out a bystander, or if it's a domestic situation, if the wife, girlfriend, whatever is in the room and they want to kill them, they will get them killed before an officer can respond and shoot them.
All right, so wait a minute, but we're a little off topic here.
Yeah, I know.
We're going to run off. I mean, you know what? We could do a whole podcast on that, and I would not mind. So what I want to do is talk about 5 years on, because there was a report out from the Sentencing Project that found that Black Americans are incarcerated at nearly 5 times the rate of white Americans, whereas Latino Americans are imprisoned 1.3 times the rate of white Americans. We're talking about today. Okay, so I pulled some statistics for you all and found out that, you know, that part in 5 years hasn't particularly changed. Bureau of Prisons keeps up statistics week by week, right? As of maybe last week, there were about 60,000 black people in prison. There were about 88,000 white people in prison. But those black people represent 40% of the prison population in America. The black people themselves make up 14.4% in the population. Less than 15% of our American population is black. So that's one of the reasons that people are upset. Okay, and the offenses, I can't go into the offenses, but they were super interesting to me too. And then I found this for the Pew Research Center. which said that at the time of the protests, 67% of U.S. adults expressed support for the Black Lives Matter movement. Now, you remember a lot of talk during that time, well, why don't white lives matter? And my only response to that was, well, why would we have to have a Black Lives Matter in the first place if they were treated equally? But 67% expressed support. Now, 5 years later, only 52% of Americans, just over half, believe that Black Lives Matter is important. Something else I think that I found even more important is that 5 years later, 72% of Americans say the increased focus on race and racial inequality after Floyd's killing did not lead to changes that improved the lives of Black people. And in fact, 49% expressed doubt that Black people will ever have equal rights with white people, and that's up from 39% in 2020. So you all can have the last word.
That's an awfully big topic. I mean, anyone who works in the system recognizes that there are racial disparities in who is prosecuted. Our local jail runs, I think, around 50-50.
Yes,
it depends
it
how
does.
you count Hispanics and Asians and stuff. But clearly, on a per capita basis, there are many more African Americans in our prison system and our jail. Well, then you have to analyze, well, why is that? Well, poverty is a big indicator of crime, and I'm not sure that if you look at the white population that's in, are the economic indicators similar for the being in prison or being incarcerated? Are they similar for low economic whites as they are with low economic blacks?
Well, we know that white people who are in prison and jail are poor for the
Right.
most part.
But is that disparity a poverty issue more, or a family breakdown issue more than a minority
Right.
versus white issue?
And we've been arguing about that for decades.
But that's what I'm saying, is that it's not quite as simple. You can also get into, over the years, there's been potential criticism of law enforcement. I use this as an example. When my kids hit their mid-teenage years and they wanted to get a driver's license, I took them to Safeway driving school, and they went through the classes, so they got so I'd get a reduction on their insurance when they came out.
And it also cost you a pretty penny to put them through Safeway.
Exactly. If you don't have any money, that is a luxury. And so then you don't get the license when you should. So then if you decide to drive, which if you want to have a job, it's pretty hard to just rely on public transportation. So you get hit with a no ops, which leads to a driving while suspended. It can become a regrettable merry-go-round that twirls on itself, that again is going to have a greater impact on poor people than it is on more well-to-do.
Oh, way more.
And that gets you into the system. And is there a lack of hope that comes along with that? That how do I get off of this merry-go-round? And this becomes the whole issue that then leads in potentially to drug abuse, that also carries you down. I mean, certainly we know we have drug addicts that are wealthy celebrities to folks that get hurt and get hooked on opioids.
And they don't tend to spend a lot of time in prison.
But then all of these things you're speaking of, Mike, is what exploded that day on May 29th.
And I think that's probably part of that answer, is that there is a frustration out there with the system. But it's a much larger issue. There are reasons why we have some of those laws to protect everybody else. In theory, you want people out driving that know the laws so they don't crash into you. Some of the saddest cases we handle are drunk driving fatality cases.
Oh, absolutely.
So sometimes these stats that show racial disparities, it's not that the racial disparity isn't there, but what are the other causes behind it? And that doesn't always get the same attention. I think as far as the approval of the Black Lives Matter, there have at least been some reports of misuse of funds that they've received. Their leadership hasn't been as transparent as a lot of
that could be a lot of nonprofits.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of.
One's coming to mind right now, but I'm not going to say it because I don't want to fuel the fire.
But the other part of that, though, and I don't know, this might be Pollyanna-ish.
Go ahead. Let's have a little Pollyanna.
But one thing I have noticed in certainly the last 20 or 30 years, when we look long-term, if you look at how we're representing society these days, turn on the TV, look at a generic ad for pharmaceuticals or anything that isn't a celebrity endorsement.
Breakfast cereal.
What are the families we're seeing on TV today?
Yeah, it's true.
They are very mixed. It is not Leave It to Beaver, Ozzie and Harriet, the 1950s sitcom
That's true.
family.
Absolutely true.
It is much different. I've noticed this when we have families come in for sentencings, in particular on criminal cases, that it used to be if it was a white family, everybody in the family was white. Mm-hmm. If it was a black victim, everybody in the family was black. Now it seems like in most cases you're seeing a mixture. Mm-hmm. We are much more multicultural, I believe, now than we were 20 years ago, 40 years ago. And there have been improvements. And I think with time we will see more of those. And
I don't think you're being Pollyanna there. I think you're right. I would agree with that.
But it is hard to change attitudes and to change when people don't know each other. Mm-hmm. When you get to know each other, it changes. And we still are very much a segregated society. So all of those things are at work. They won't happen overnight. A lot of things have been legislated in the last 50, 60 years, but legislation can only take you so far. Then it takes time for attitudes to change.
Agreed. All right. Well, I think it's time to sign off because we have been talking for a lot. In fact, there's a lot more things we could say about those protests, and maybe we will. We're going to try and drop some of that video in this one so that you can see some of the things that were going on. But for now, this has been The Probable Cause. We hope to see you next week too. You can find us at www.theprobablecause.com. You can also find us on Spotify and Apple now for your podcasts. So until next time, goodbye. This episode is filmed and edited by Frosty Pictures. The Probable Cause is produced by Maumee Media.
Worried when I crossed the Michigan line, a cop from Steuben County waiting on I-69. A headlamp went out while he pulled me over, charged me with possession after I rolled down the window. Now that's skunk. Indians a trip when it comes to weed. It's like who doesn't smoke or use gummies? Your grandpa, your brother, your rich friend from school? Hell, throw in the whole courthouse and my attorney too. It's time those assholes change these stupid laws. It ain't worth the paper for a probable cause. Sitting on a bar stool in my usual place, this guy next to me said he was looking for some cocaine. Hell, I just sold him an 8-ball with a little piece off for me. But my buyer was a cop? Should've known he was a creep. So I'm a dealer, right? You gotta be kidding. It's a rich man's drug. I just take it because I'm injured. 8 years in Westville with a monkey on my back. There's more drugs in here than you can shake a shank at. One dirty drug test, man, this system's flawed. Undercover screwed me in my probable cause. Street crimes never did me no favors. I'm hooked on Fetty. I'm a junkie, not a felon. Told that son of a bitch on the way to lockup. I can't seem to shake it. I need help, not mocking. What do you want from someone who's been through the system? Drugs all through the house before mom and dad went to prison. Throw me in jail and give me a fine? Someday I'll be dead and away from your kind. Now I'm at the courthouse in front of a judge. Can't say my public defender cares for me much. Crimes are committed on both sides of the law. God help me now with this probable cause. C-shift never gets old. Anything can happen when you're out on patrol. You think I'm just eating donuts, man? Give me a break. Nothing on this job is a piece of cake. Lights and sirens activated. This knucklehead wants to chase. Baby mama at the scene just spit in my face. Wife's worried that someday I won't be pulling up at all. You'll read about my killer in a probable call. Man. She went through my phone and she seen my text. I told her forget it. It was just my ex. She took a swing and knocked me flat. Man, I went wild and hit her back. Judge slapped me with a no contact order. Now she's got the kids and she's staying with her mother. So she started it all and I have to take the fall. You can read my whole story in the probable call. When I was young, caught a case for dealing and did my time. Yeah, I got a record, but I was doing fine. Running my own business on the southeast side. Yeah, I got a gun. I kept it on hand. Told the cop my reason, thought he'd understand. In this neighborhood, you need some protection. Attorney thought I could get just community corrections, but the judge decided to send me to prison. Can't get ahead no matter how hard I try. Read the probable cause, it'll make you
Whispers
cry.
and rumors that don't get reported. Stories I write that are often distorted. Got my notebook and pen, and I'm ready to listen. Tell me the truth, I'll consider your position. I've seen killers with eyes so cold and dead, and others go to prison because of what someone said, rotting away for the rest of their lives, leaving a hole here on the outside. Things are sad here on earth, and it's no wonder why, when you consider the sociopaths who remain in charge. It's me who sees the system for all its flaws, and I usually start with the probable cause. My right hand is reading the probable cause.